there, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Home Tech. Jason Griffin here, joined again by Seth. Seth, how are you?
Good, Jason. It's been a crazy week.
Yeah, I hear you've got a new friend keeping you company there.
I do. It's actually not my friend. It's my wife's friend. She's
joining us for the show.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Well, her name is Alexa, but last night we were playing around with this Amazon Echo, and oh good, it turned off. We changed there's the thing like the wake word thing, the safe word, whatever. I don't know what they call it.
Safe.
Yeah, and they you can change that to either Alexa or Amazon. And when you say Amazon, it wakes up and starts listening to you. And it doesn't do anything. All right, good. So I can just say, Amazon, how are you?
I'm good.
And that's all you get from it. So it's, from the best I can tell so far, it's like a very, very basic Siri. You can do things like ask it the weather. So, Amazon, what's the weather like? Amazon, what's the weather like?
Currently, in Sarasota, it's 77 degrees with clear skies. Tonight, you can look for clouds and a low of 69 degrees.
Oh, yeah, not so bad. But I found like you can't ask it like pretty advanced things like Siri. You can ask, what are the current scores, or whatever. Like last night I was asking about hockey scores and it just had no idea what to do. Which
gotcha.
Siri kind of nailed right out the gate, I think, right? So I don't know. It has a little ways to go. But it's a pretty cool device. My wife, she put it in the bathroom. Like when she's getting ready in the morning, she can yell at it and say, "Hey, Alexa," or whatever. Play some music, and it'll actually does a pretty good job of just randomly playing some Amazon Prime music, which is okay, I guess. And you can do some other cool things. It's trying to because I said Amazon, it's woken up and yelling at me now. So yeah, but I'm gonna turn it off.
Well, that's cool. I mean, I know that you've been kind of looking forward to getting your hands on it for a while, and so far it sounds like you're kind of having a good time experimenting with it. I think it'll be interesting to kind of see how, like, after you've had it for a while, does it start to collect dust, or do you really find like everyday uses for it? And I think, like you said, I mean, using it as a streaming music player definitely sounds like a compelling use case. I'm not familiar with Amazon's like streaming music offerings intimately. Obviously I know of them, but I've never had any direct experience with them, so I can't speak to the experience there. Is that kind of like one of the main reasons that you guys looked at buying it, was to use it as a music player?
No, my wife got an email from them and said, hey, this looks pretty cool. So, and I don't know if you remember that like little commercial they did with the Goofy family walking around.
Yep.
Pretty much doing exactly what we did last night and asking how many tablespoons were in a cup. Yeah, because that's really all it can do. It doesn't, it plays that Amazon Music, but you can also link it to a Pandora account, which you can say, hey, play me some Pandora music, this particular station. And if it recognizes, we have quite a bit of time trying to get it to play 80s music last night, and it just kind of would not do it. It just refused. But it I don't know, the sound quality isn't like, we have a Sonos Play 3, which is the medium size speaker that Sonos sells.
Yep. And
that thing sounds like a million times better. This is more like the Play 1, I guess. And it has a little microphone on top, and it's the best way I can describe it. It really sounds like the Play 1. It also plays tune-in radio, so kind of not the best like high quality audio experience from things like from anything that comes over TuneIn is like rebroadcasted radio stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean it's a good start. I'm curious to see where Amazon goes with it. It's got a long way to go before it catches up with things like Siri. It's just not quite there yet. But they did announce that developer program, so I'm going to kind of see what I can do with that and see where that goes. But
cool.
Yeah.
Well, definitely, keep us posted on that. I think that just in the limited time you and I have sat here talking about this device tonight, it really speaks to the real challenges of voice controlled anything. And that's a technology that a lot of people are generally excited about to see, where it goes and how it develops over time. I know it's a fairly big part of like the Apple Watch, which we're going to talk about tonight, and being able to kind of dictate. And obviously that uses Siri, which as you've alluded to, seems to be, pretty far along relative to some of the other voice recognition technologies out there. But it is a challenge because when you start using a device on a daily basis, if you're trying to control it with your voice and it's working even 90 or 95% of the time, really, it's still not an acceptable user experience. And eventually you're just going to go back to kind of the tried and true method of pulling out your phone to turn Pandora on the Sonos, because you know that it'll work, and you're not going to sit there and, shout at the Echo all morning trying to get the station to change. So I think that's really, with voice control, it's kind of the double-edged sword. I will say, coincidentally, that I am starting to see more of a need for it in my life now that I've got a newborn at home. There have been times when when I've got my daughter and I'm holding her and I want lights to turn on in a room or something to happen, and I don't have a free hand. And now that I've kind of been experiencing that in my personal life, I've had more of a need for voice control, and I have been kind of seeing a little bit more value in it. But yeah, it's just got a ways to go.
Yeah, one thing I didn't realize this had before, but I guess I should have, is that if the voice control just plain doesn't work for you, it's actually controlled from an app from your phone, so you can take that out and actually tell it what to do from there. Right, which is a million times more reliable.
Yeah,
there's no missing that you hit play and pause when you scream that out. Although play and pause works really well. One thing that doesn't work well that we have to get fixed. Watch this. Amazon, play the HomeTech podcast.
To listen to an audiobook, use the Audible app on your mobile device connected to Echo over Bluetooth.
Oh man, last night it said I can't find the Tech Home podcast, and I'm like, oh geez. Well, we've got to get that fixed. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's a good way to close our conversation on that. Definitely will be curious to see, like, as you kind of dive into it more from the developer side, and especially with it, like you alluded to, becoming a platform to interface with more of the smart home. I don't know if you have any plans to kind of integrate it into your home and your project that you're working on, but certainly keep us posted on that.
All right, will do. So we should probably take a little short moment here to kind of tell people how they could support the show. As most of our listeners know, we are now listener supported through a little website called Patreon, which if you like, you can go over there and donate, a couple bucks a month, $1 a month for the cause here, and that's how we keep the lights on, so to speak, keep things going, and to keep the show advancing and moving forward and being a little bit more than just a labor of love between us two. We just want to see what we can do, and every little bit helps from everyone that listens. So we're going to include the link there in the show notes. If you want to head to HomeTech.fm/support, you can see all the links on how to get to Patreon there too.
Yeah, definitely. And every little bit helps, like you said, and we definitely appreciate it. And if you're listening and, you can't afford to support the show financially, but you do enjoy it and you think it's a valuable resource, the one other big way that you can help would be to leave us a review on iTunes. That's a great way to help us spread the word and help more people find the show. And we would greatly appreciate that. So definitely take a moment to go check that out. And we hope, that you'll be able to support the show. So with that said, we do want to move into kind of our main features. We got a couple of sort of broad topics that we want to touch on here for this episode. And obviously one of them, the big one here is the Apple Watch. It's officially on sale now. I know last week we had kind of alluded to this on our last week's episode, but sort of with the timing of that episode and how we recorded it, it was kind of the night before the big release, and so we didn't have a lot to go on. And frankly, a lot of this stuff is still so new. Everything really, all the apps we're looking at all seem to say, coming soon. So there's not a whole lot of information for us to go on. We don't really want to specifically talk about the details of the Apple Watch. Neither one of us own one. We can't really give that sort of insight. And also, it just gets covered all over the place. There's plenty of other places that you can go to get that coverage. But what we want to focus on here on tonight's episode is how the Apple Watch specifically plays into the smart home. So we've got sort of a list of different companies and manufacturers that have at a minimum said they're going to be coming out with an Apple Watch app, if not, come out with one already. And we're going to kind of run through that list real quick and maybe just spend a couple minutes on each of those tonight.
Yeah, and the list, if you want to, follow along, is over on our blog over at HomeTech.fm/blog. And the long URL for this thing is we'll be just putting the show notes and a link to it, the article. And if you scroll down, there's a big long table there of all the manufacturers and devices that we found and listeners and people who post in the comments have found as well and reached out to us and donated some info to this list, I guess. The big one, I guess, that we probably should talk about is Alarm.com. Believe it or not.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most advanced one I've seen. What say you?
Yeah, they seem to be like kind of out there in front of the pack. For what reasons, who knows? Maybe they had an inside track, or maybe they just saw the writing on the wall a little sooner and got more resources behind it, or whatever it is. But they do seem to be the furthest along and kind of getting the most coverage. I know they were part of like one of the keynote addresses that talked about the Apple Watch, and it was demoed up on stage as far as being able to do things like check the status of a garage door, open and close it, see the status of different zones in your security system. And I think that it makes perfect sense. I mean, security is obviously, especially when you start getting into kind of the DIY smart home market and just the everyday consumer, and not necessarily, talking about the hardcore enthusiasts, but just everyday consumers. Security is one of those things that drives them into the smart home. It's sort of a great entry point for a lot of consumers. And I think the fact that Alarm.com is one of the first ones out of the gate with an Apple Watch app makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, and okay, full disclaimer, I sell Alarm.com. And have for quite a number of years. I've had it at my house. I have it at this house. And outside of the Apple Watch, I mean, the app for the phones and the internet, I mean, that is a really cool app, really great service, and a really good add-on to a security system. I wouldn't say that if I didn't believe it, because it is actually a pretty good product. You do end up paying a little bit more for it, but for that interactiveness. But all the stuff you can do without having to call a dealer out to do, like, sometimes in the past, some of the systems we had to basically send a technician out and program in a code or change the code for the client because they couldn't remember their code. And you can do this if you just remember your password online. You go online, you change your code to get into your house, you add new codes in. All that can be done through the Alarm.com interface, which is pretty cool. Not anything revolutionary, but I think they've spent their time working on their interface, their user-facing interface, to make the clunky, kludgy world of security systems friendly to the end user. And that's what they were able to do with this Apple Watch. It really does look pretty cool, and probably the most full-featured offering I've seen to date.
Yeah, and I will say, just generally about security companies, it's always been a surprise to me. I've never personally done work on security panels or sold them, or even worked for a firm that did. So I don't have a lot of direct experience deploying these systems, but obviously pretty much every home that I work on has them. So I'm around them all the time. And I will say that a lot of them seem very clunky and kind of just like not a lot of thought or concern is put into kind of that user-facing interface, like you said. And I think that Alarm.com has done a great job of that, and I think the Apple Watch app is no exception.
Yeah, and they were featured in one of those keynotes, so they may have had a little bit of advanced access. I'm sure they did, because we spoke with one of the guys at Lutron, and they kind of nodded and said, "Yeah, we got a call from Cupertino, and some of the execs went down and had to get some stuff mocked up for a keynote."
Yep.
So I guess that's the next one we should talk about is Lutron.
Yeah. Lutron is a company that we talk about a lot here on the show. I'm noticing more and more that their name keeps on coming up in our episodes. And I think that as a company, Lutron is making a lot of really smart moves. They've been very well established for a very long time in the professional dealer installed channels with high-end systems like HomeWorks and, even into the Radio Raw stuff, which I think they're just calling Raw 2 now. But, they're continuing to support all that and do a great job in that market, but also innovating downstream with lines like Caseta. And that this brings us to our Apple Watch app. So we saw that Lutron was one of the apps that just sort of flashed by in a slide. They weren't quite given the same sort of coverage, I guess, in Apple's keynote or speech or anything like that. But it was one of those apps we saw very early on pop up on Apple's Apple Watch demonstration. And so clearly they probably had a little bit of an inside track as well. And it looks like they've got a pretty nice offering that ties into specifically, we were looking at the Caseta stuff. But Seth, I think you were telling me before the show that they have plans or are coming out with Apple Watch apps to do. Was it all of their lines?
Yeah, I was actually meeting with my Lutron reps today, and I was asking about the Caseta integration. And they said, oh no, that's going to be on the full line. So QS and Raw 2 should get it as well, which is great because if you paid for, Caseta is great. It's a very, very inexpensive system compared to Raw 2 and QS. Which is just way and above and beyond. But yeah, if you can get that on a Raw 2 system, that you've paid a great amount of money for, or a QS system, that you've paid even more for, that's even better. So I'm glad to hear that they're moving it for the entire line. Now, what was announced yesterday with the if this then that integration with Caseta, that won't be evidently available on the Raw 2 or QS line. Those are going to be strictly left to the integrators.
Interesting.
Which is kind of sad because it'd be kind of cool to open those up too.
Yeah, and it's a small tangent, but it ties in obviously to Lutron. And so like you alluded to, they did announce that they're going to get if this then that integration on the Caseta line, which I think, again, it's like if this then that integration has almost become like a little checkbox on the spec sheet. If you're operating in the smart home, are you compatible with this if this then that? It's almost like a mandatory question. And I think it's a no-brainer for the Caseta line. Makes a lot of sense. Kind of sad they're not doing it on the higher end lines, but I also understand why, because that's what the integrators are there to do, and they're also maybe things that we're not necessarily directly thinking of when it comes to supporting that across their entire line, where maybe they can afford to kind of do that on the down market stuff. But who knows? Interesting nonetheless. As far as the Apple Watch app goes, this is something I've been looking at each one of these and just sort of trying to figure out, okay, what's the compelling use case here for a guy like me who right now is on the fence, kind of falling on the side of hold off on the Apple Watch. I don't need it yet. I'm not going to buy, version 1 of this product, but I am sort of putting myself in the shoes of somebody who's really straddling that line, right? And is really very much on the fence about whether they want to buy one or not, and looking at these apps and trying to see what the real value is and what's going to kind of push me over the edge to buy it. And, I got to say, looking at most of these, it's kind of just like a miniature version of the iPhone app. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it just sort of that's really what all of this stuff is at its core. And I think that, the having that ability to control things from your wrist is nice, but where this all gets really interesting is eventually when it ties into sort of maybe gesture-based control from your wrist of lights and shades on a Lutron system could be really interesting, or even tying it into like micro-location with iBeacons throughout the house. And that's where I think things could get really interesting. I think right now, they're sort of pointing out things on the Lutron app, like one thing they pointed out, control the shades when you're on vacation to give your house a lived-in look. And I saw this, I think it was in the description on the iTunes store of this app. And it's like, well, when you're on vacation, are you going to really sit on your Apple Watch and like open and close the shades like just because you can? Like when you could just as easily do that on a schedule. like before the Apple Watch ever came out. You know what I mean? So that things like that don't really strike me as a compelling use case, and almost like marketing people sort of looking to put the value into the product. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I think. Well, I know that the Apple Watch is very limited in what you can do. As you know, coming from a developer side, you're pretty much have your hands tied by Apple at this point in time, because I don't think they knew what people were going to do with the watch, and I think they're just seeing what these developers are going to do with this watch, and then as time goes on, they'll open more and more features up for it. So, you know, maybe those things you're looking to do will be available. Maybe they're just not available now for technical reasons, right? Maybe in the future there'll be a way to do it better than what can be done today, and maybe that's why some of these companies are holding off. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's all very early, like you said, and certainly I think you're 100% right that there's, I'm sure, very intelligent developers at all of these companies we're going to talk about that are looking at possibilities and wishing that there was things they could do with the product that they're probably just not able to do, given either the current hardware or, you know, possibly restrictions in the development environment. But either way, I think it's an interesting product. Again, just to kind of bring this one full circle, I don't think that there's a lot of people necessarily on the fence that are going to make their decision one way or the other based on the availability of one or two or even a group of apps. I think most of the people that are going to buy an Apple Watch are going to buy it, you know, for a variety of reasons, but they're not going to look at a particular app and say, oh, this app, you know, it can do X, Y, or Z. So that makes my decision for me.
Yeah. And I mean, let's take a look at some of these other big names on here. SmartThings, Nest, DropCam. Those are all Google owned. Well, not Google owned. So SmartThings is Samsung owned. Nest and DropCam, Google owned. Like Nest, you know, people bought in the Apple Store. Right. You know, right when this thing was released, it was put right there on the Apple Store shelves, and the Nest, you know, was purchased by Google, pulled from the Apple Store, and now there seems to be some kind of like invisible line in the sand that no one can cross because Nest is now owned by Google, and so that means the Apple customers can't have the same experience they did before. Right. I don't know. That kind of sucks, you know. I really wish that maybe that's not the reason, but it sure seems like the reason. Like those, I would think day one Nest should have something on the Apple Watch.
No, it is interesting, and I was very much wondering, like, will that day ever come? Like, is Nest going to have one? I don't know. Like, or is it going to be sort of a turf war, I guess, between, you know, because there is Android Wear, and Google may choose to draw a line in the sand here. Who knows? Or Apple may choose to. It'll be interesting to see. Speaking of smart thermostats, I did see that I think the guys at Ecobee had announced one, presumably coming soon. I think most of these are, right. Like we've looked at a bunch of these, and really most of them are coming soon, probably still being developed. But I think Ecobee, any smart thermostat maker, obviously it's, you know, kind of a no-brainer to get into doing an Apple Watch app.
Yeah, and I mean that's for me the integrator's dilemma, right? Everything is coming soon, you know. Like there's always something us, you know, as integrators have seen at a show or you know, seen a press release on. Coming soon doesn't mean anything to me anymore. I am over that. Until I can physically hold the product in my hands and make it work.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exactly.
Right.
So, if you're an end user and you're listening to this, take that to heart. Yeah. It will save you a lot of pain over time.
Yeah. In fairness to the guys at Ecobee, I actually don't know offhand if that one is, you know, quote unquote shipping or coming soon, but just generally I've noticed a lot of these are coming soon. Honeywell Lyric is another one that has an Apple Watch app. I know Richard Gunther, friend of the show, is presumably listening. Insteon does have an Apple Watch app. Pretty nice looking page, actually, that they've got up, kind of pointing out the features on that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, most people with Insteon are kind of that product tends to appeal mostly to the enthusiast and DIY crowd, although they're certainly making strides to kind of change that. And I think that'll be a great fit for anybody who's got an Insteon system. And I'd be curious, Richard, if you're listening, I don't know that you're going to buy an Apple Watch, but if you do, certainly let us know.
Yeah, definitely. That's a cool product. Not only appeals to the DIYers, it appealed to me. I mean, it's a nice looking product. Yep.
Yeah.
Some big names on our end that are absent. Control 4.
Yep.
Hasn't really said anything and doesn't really. I mean, one would presume they would have one coming soon. I don't know. Haven't heard anything one way or another. Crestron coming soon. They have a nice little mock-up. Savant, they announced one, but it's coming soon as well, right?
Yeah. It currently says coming soon. I think very soon. I mean, just based on like what I've heard from my rep, which is little. I mean, they're not able to divulge a lot of information to me right now, but they're definitely, like, especially being such an Apple-centric company. I mean, that is obvious. And I think, with Savant, with having a system like Savant behind the Apple Watch, I think is where it gets very compelling, because, like, especially now with the new Savant software, end users have a lot of capability to do their own scene creation. So you can set up scenes that, do things with the lights, the climate, the shades, the TV, the music, whatever it is. And all that Apple Watch has to do is make a call to that scene. So you kind of get the horsepower of a Savant fully integrated, dealer installed, customized solution with the convenience of an Apple Watch app. And I think that sounds like a very compelling offering.
Yeah, that would be cool. I mean, honestly, any one of these companies that we have on this list would be really cool to have an app. I think I'm kind of leaning, as I see what people come out with for apps, maybe a little bit around fitness, maybe a little bit around, other things. I'm kind of leaning towards like, okay, I might need one of these, but I really like what Lutron did. I really like what Insteon did. And I really liked what alarm.com did. Those three right there. I mean, I would think I'd want to pick one up. And there is actually an integration between alarm.com and Caseta. So conceivably you could control your lights from your watch too without, all in one app, which is kind of killer. Let's kind of keep running down this list here. August Smart Lock doesn't have one, which is kind of shocking, because that's kind of like that's kind of the nest of smart locks, as people like to say. And it's kind of interesting that one doesn't. I mean, you can buy that at the Apple Store, and it doesn't have a watch app out yet. Canary, Quirky, the Wink Hub. I think they're too busy patching the thing to worry about. Let's give them a buy on this one.
yeah, give them a pass.
Vera doesn't have one, which I thought was interesting. Vera is very popular in the DIY world for home automation, and like the super geeky power users, like me. Right. If I wasn't in this industry, I'd have a Vera for sure. And Harmony Remotes doesn't have one, which I was kind of shocked to see.
Yeah, that like all of these are really only a matter of time. In particular, Harmony. I got to think that Harmony's working hard on it. I mean, they've been so active lately in the smart home space in general, and I just have to believe that it's only a matter of probably weeks until we see something from them.
Yeah. Weeks or months, who knows? It's all coming soon. Right? I
mean, it is a very new. It's a whole new product category, basically. I mean, I know there's guys out there screaming at the podcast right now saying, "Oh, wearable tech and smartwatches have been out for a while, but not by Apple." And if whether you like it or not, I think you kind of have to admit that when Apple comes into categories like this, the same way they did with digital music players, smartphones, and tablets, it changes the game. And so now that Apple is in the business of making smartwatches, I think that it shifts the whole landscape. And I'm certainly not going out on a limb by saying that. And I think it's going to be really interesting to watch. I mean, the fact that we could sit here tonight for 20, 30, 40 minutes and talk about all the different apps that are coming out already and stuff that we think is exciting. And that's just focused on the smart home. And the product's only been on the market for, like a week or something. So this is very much an evolving thing and a kind of a moving target, and really something that obviously we're going to be keeping a close eye on and talking about more moving forward.
Did you mean to make that pun about watching the watch? I thought I'd point that out.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, it was too good. I was like, oh yeah, we're going to keep an eye on this and watch it. Well,
you got it.
Speaking of things we're watching, 4K is coming, and this HDCP 2.2, man, we're going to have some problems with this thing, aren't we?
Yeah, it's a whole mess, and we actually talked about this a few weeks ago on an episode where we had Cody Crossland on, who's a listener to the show and a supporter of the show, and we had him on for one of our listener segments, and this was one of the topics that we really focused on, and it's something that I'm paying a ton of attention to as an integrator, because it, just like HDMI has a track record of really being a thorn in the side of, I would say, consumers, but especially integrators and people who do this for a living and have to service and support video systems. And HDCP 2.2, if anybody is listening who's not familiar, HDCP 2 is the copy protection that they put on HDMI. Currently, we're on, I guess, version, whatever it is, 2.1. And basically, there's a big change coming with HDCP 2.2 that's related to 4K UHD content. And the big issue with it is a hardware change. It is not something, if you have an HDMI piece in your signal chain that is not HDCP 2.2 compliant, it cannot be updated via firmware. You have to replace that piece of equipment. And if you don't, then as we start to see more 4K UHD content come online and become available, you could start to run into issues with, basically getting black screens when you go to watch something. And it's something that people just need to be very aware of, especially if you're in the market right now for new display technology or video distribution hardware.
Yeah, I think especially with what we do with video distribution, I think you'd probably be okay if next year you sit down, you buy a 4K TV, a receiver that has 4K stamped on it, and a Blu-ray, 4K Blu-ray player or 4K media player of some type, and maybe your cable box. I don't know. The cable boxes tend to cause some issues too, but I think you'll be okay. I think where dealers are going to have a problem are with these video distribution systems, and all this was kind of kicked off. There's a really good article over at CE Pro. All this was kicked off this week when Control4 announced a HDCP 2.2 compliant HDMI switch. It looks like they announced a couple of them: a 6x6, an 8x8, a 10x10, and it looks like a kit. So it's actually three of them and a kit. So they released these products, and it's just kind of started this kind of deep dive into HDCP 2.2 by Julie Jacobson on CE Pro. And what a great article. This is like so in depth here. But I mean, basically, let's take this into a real world example with video distribution. The question is going to be like how these systems behave when products that aren't necessarily on 2.2 are introduced into the mix. So say you have some old 1080p TVs that you hook up and install alongside your new 4K TVs. How are those going to interact with all this 4K signal chain that has to be in place? I mean, if everything has to be perfect all the way down for this device to authorize and play its content, how is that going to happen? And this reading all this and all this speculation and questions, this reminds me so much of those early HDMI days. I think we have a storm brewing on the horizon here.
I think, unfortunately, we do. And you say it reminds you of the early HDMI days. Unfortunately for me, it reminds me of all the HDMI days. Like, I've never had a good taste in my mouth when it comes to HDMI. It's something that I do feel strongly about. I think that it doesn't, it shouldn't be so difficult. As an integrator, I should be able to go out and spec a series of devices that all have HDMI and just have confidence that they're going to work. But you get this whole issue with performance signatures, and the fact of the matter is you can have one or two devices that can just wreak havoc on an entire system, and then you go put that same exact physical piece of hardware, not even the same model, but literally you could pull that same piece of hardware out of the system, go put it in with a different combination of gear, and it'll work just fine, because it's a combination, it's an aggregate combination of the performance signatures of the pieces of hardware you have. And that is just the performance. That has nothing to do with actual chipsets and copy protection protocols. And so the whole thing is frankly, it's a mess. And I think that integrators and consumers alike are well advised to be paying attention right now. Like you alluded to, I think that for 99% of consumers who are in the market for new display technology, this isn't something that you really need to worry too much about, because I think pretty much all of the 4K TVs that are out on the market right now have HDCP 2.2, although I have noticed on some of them that if you look specifically, it might only be on like one of the HDMI inputs. So you might be buying a TV that has so you might be buying a TV that has like 4 HDMI inputs and only one of them is HDCP 2.2. And they do that to keep the cost down. And it's just something to be aware of, because at that point, you would need like an AV receiver or a switcher of some sort. One other point I want to make on all of this is that we are still talking about essentially future proofing, because this hasn't really come into play too much yet because of the lack of 4K content on the market. There's not a lot out there to watch. So this really isn't having a day-to-day effect on really anyone, but it is something to be conscious of, something to be aware of, particularly if you're in the market for, a new TV, new receiver, or especially like Seth, you alluded to, if you're out shopping right now, either you're an integrator designing a system or you're a homeowner who's shopping around different integrators to have maybe a video distribution system designed or whatever it is. That's when you really need to pay attention, because there's not a lot of these matrix switchers out there that have HDCP 2.2 yet.
Right. And as integrators, this is when we need to start paying attention. My projects that I'm putting together with products today, and looking at the list of products that are on here, these are the products I'm going to be using when I install this system. And it is a gamble. I mean, if I don't, like I said earlier, if I don't have these products physically in my hand and see them working, they don't work. I mean, that's the same thing. And some integrators don't take that to heart. They will gamble with tens of thousands of dollars in equipment, and try and put it in, and they'll run into a problem with, I can't watch cable on 3 TVs in the house because of this 2.2 issue.
Right. And
there'll be all sorts of little workarounds and this, that's, and the other. I mean, it becomes such a mess, but I think I have knowing most of all of the manufacturers that were listed on this, I think they'll all figure it out. But it seems like there's enough warning, enough red flags going up. Like, we should be paying attention to this right now. This is what we should be talking about and trying to figure out how to work around right now. Because I think for integrators, not so much for consumers, but for integrators, we need to figure this out now, because in a year's time, we're going to have a lot of pain if we don't. Oh, yeah,
definitely. One final point I wanted to make on this article, and Julie alludes to it as well, is that, the Control 4 is sort of pitching this as like the first HDCP 2.2 matrix out there. I don't quite understand that particular claim, because to my knowledge, Crestron, the DM stuff is 2.2 compliant. I found an article from Julie on CE Pro from back in February at ISE, where Crestron was talking about HDCP 2.2 support. Actually, which just speaks to the confusion. As a Crestron dealer and a guy who works with it every day, I have to go double check. And that's just how confusing this is. I don't know if this article from ISE was just basically them saying, hey, we're going to have this soon, or if they're actually shipping it. It can all get very confusing, especially when you start introducing, marketing departments and all of that sort of thing. So there's a lot to keep track of, but it is an important conversation.
HDMI still causing confusion. This should be its slogan.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, Seth. Well, I enjoyed the conversation once again. Just want to thank everybody for tuning in. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us every week. If you enjoy the show, stop by iTunes, leave us a review. Check out the Patreon page at HomeTech.fm/support. Also, you can leave us a comment on our website using our feedback form, which is HomeTech.fm/feedback, or find us on Twitter at HomeTech Podcast. We would love to hear from you.
Absolutely. And one more thing I want to mention, Jason, you had a very, very good article in Tech Home Builder this last week.
Yeah.
We definitely want to point that out. I actually wanted to talk to you a little bit about that, and maybe we'll touch on it next week because it had some pretty good things. But if you haven't read that yet, it's definitely a good read about designing a system. And just like what we were talking about, knowing what you're putting in and making sure it will all work ahead of time.
I had a great time writing the article, and I... Tech Home Builder, for people who aren't familiar, is a publication and a website geared very much at home builders. But I think it's a relevant article for anybody who's interested in kind of professional integration and even the smart home just in general. And the article, the goal of my article was to kind of speak to the importance of just proper design and 3 steps that you can take if you're designing a smart home or in the market for one, that you can kind of take to ensure that you get proper design and that you give adequate attention to that phase of the project. And like this HDCP 2.2 conversation ties right into that, right? I mean, it all comes down to that early planning stage and making sure that you're really giving enough thought and time to that.
Absolutely. It's a great article. We'll put a link to it in the show notes, or head on over to Tech Home Builder. I'm sure you can find it right there, but our show notes at HomeTech.fm/shows/62, right?
Yep, you got it.
Absolutely.
All right, Seth. Well, we'll wrap it up here. Thanks, everybody, again for listening, and we will talk to you next week.
Amazon, tell me a joke.
Did you hear the one about the man who failed to climb a hill without a watch? He had neither the time nor the inclination.
God, it's so bad. So bad.